Whereas April marks the anniversary of the passage of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, and Vacaville will celebrate the occasion by offering various education activities throughout the year, including homebuyer workshops and landlord roundtable with a focus on fair housing issues. Now, therefore, I, Ron Roulette, Mayor of the City of Vacaville, on behalf of the City Council, do proclaim April 2020 as Fair Housing Month in the City of Vacaville. Thank you very much. We'll move to item 6, consent calendar. Is there anybody from the council that would like to pull anything off the consent calendar?
Yeah. I have a couple.
Okay, we'll start with Harris.
So 6B and 6J, please.
Sullivan?
I think I have the same ones. 6B, hold on real quick. Yeah, I'm good. Those are my two.
Okay. Do we have any from the public?
Yes, we had a request to pull 6B and 6J, and we have a comment on 6D.
Okay, can I get a motion for 6A, C, E, F, G, H, I, K, please?
So moved.
So moved.
I got a motion by Beatty and seconded by Harris. All those in favor, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan?
I'm an aye. I think he said J though, and we wanted to pull J.
Yes, we're pulling B, D, and J.
Okay, thank you. Yes, aye. Sorry.
Okay. Vice Mayor Beatty?
Aye.
Mayor Roulette?
Aye. I'll start with Councilmember Harris on 6B.
Yes, I received a couple of emails in regard to this particular item, and I'd really like to hear, Melinda, our city attorney, I think she was going to address this, read the questions from the public.
Okay, is that all your comments?
That's all my comments right now, yes.
Okay, Councilmember Sullivan.
I think my comments were sort of similar. I received several emails and comments about this as well. The three kind of pieces that I'm concerned about or have some questions about. The first one would be, it appears we didn't follow our own ordinance with the last appointment process. And so I think Melinda might be addressing that tonight, but based on the ordinance the city had in place, it looks like we may have missed some steps over the last year or so. And I want to figure out how we remedy or rectify that, or what steps we need to take to correct that. The change to the state policy, the state government code, happened in January of 2016. So I'm kind of wondering, based on timing, why the change was made now. And I think we were told that there was some sort of conflict based on the existing city municipal code versus the government code. And so I'm kind of wondering the timing and the trigger and kind of what that difference was. And in reviewing the California government code, I was under the impression or the understanding that we only had kind of one option, or we were changing it for one piece. But in reading the government code, there's actually 7 different options we could have chose from. So I'm not sure if I really felt like we were fully educated on the decision we made, although I wasn't at that meeting anyways. There's just a lot more to that decision than I was under the impression of. And I did listen to that meeting, but there's a lot more information there. So I think Melinda was going to speak to some of those items tonight, but those were my primary concerns.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up public comment. I know we have at least one comment.
Yes. So comment on item 6B. This is one from Wendy Brecken. She would like it to be withdrawn and redrafted without misleading language. In addition, the March 10th appointment was also based on misleading language and should be reconsidered. There is a misrepresentation in the proposed ordinance number 1957 as drafted. The proposed ordinance reads in relevant part as follows. Whereas in October 2007, the City Council adopted Ordinance 1788, adding Section 2.20.040 to the Vacaville Municipal Code to to address how city council vacancies were filled, and to prevent the ability to fill a city council vacancy by appointment that would be effective for more than half of the original city council term. And whereas, to avoid confusion and to provide for a more efficient process when filling city council vacancies by appointment, the City Council desires to repeal the provisions of the Vacaville Municipal Code and follow the provisions of Government Code 36512 related to filling City Council vacancies. In fact, the purpose of the proposed repeal is not to avoid confusion, but to change the process by which appointments are made from a temporary appointment requiring a special election within 114 days of the call of the special election to an appointment with no special election. This should be made clear to City Council as well as the public. Vacaville Municipal Code, Section 2.20.040, calls for special elections following appointment of a council member. VMC 2.20.040 is consistent with Government Code Section 36512C3 as amended, which allows cities to choose to hold special elections for vacancies after making a temporary appointment. In fact, the 2007 ordinance specifically referenced Section 36512C3. If the City Council chose to keep VMC Section 2.20.040, it could do so. Instead, in its March 10th appointment item, item 8C, the City is choosing to appoint City Council members in a different manner under Government Code Section 36512B. Additionally, while staff states that this item has nothing to do with the March 10th appointment item, item 8C, it clearly is related in that both items involve the appointment of City Council in the event of a vacancy. Staff indicated to the City Council in that item that the VMC and state law require an appointment process or a special election. This is a misrepresentation of the law. The City Council specifically chose an ordinance requiring a temporary appointment and special election. This item should be withdrawn and a correct recitation of the law should be created. In addition, item 8C should be reconsidered based on the long-standing city preference for an election in the event of a City Council vacancy and the misrepresentation of that preference.
Your 3 minutes are up. Okay, is there any more public comment?
Yes, Chair, I have one. I'm going to open their mic. It's number 3395.
I wanted to speak on public comments, item 7 and also 8A, but I guess I got connected early, so it's the next item, I guess.
And then we have one further email comment on this item.
For 6B? Go ahead.
Yes.
Can we restart the 3-minute clock?
Dear Mayor, Ron Roulette, Council members Aaron Bush and Melinda Stewart. Considering that appointments to council vacancies deprive the voters of their ability to select their representatives, it's important that council adopt an appropriate process for filling council vacancies. I'm respectfully asking that you suspend the vote on today's item 6B following, which raises appointment. The city's own ordinance 1758, Municipal Code 0 established 13 years ago, 2007, appears to require council vacancies be filled with a special election. Yet no special election was ever held to replace the appointment of Raymond Beatty. Perhaps there is no issue, but you should know that the code states in part, if the council elects to fill the vacancy by appointment, the person appointed shall hold the office only until the date the council declares the results of a special election, which shall immediately be called to fill the remainder of the term as permitted by subsection C3 of Government Code Section 36512. 2, despite the city's rule that an appointee only hold office until a vacancy is filled with a special election, staff never brought to the attention of council or residents the complete language of this code during relevant public meetings. For example, during the January 7, 2019 meeting when Beatty was appointed, Even after council members Nolan Sullivan and Dilena Harris asked about the cost and process of a special election, staff only talked about how expensive it was to hold a special election and never mentioned the existence or requirements of this code. 3, meanwhile, on March 10th, 2020 and April 14th, 2020, the staff report did not give all the reasons for wanting to repeal the code. In one staff report, it indicated this code needs to be repealed because the existing code addressed a loophole in state law that no longer exists. Staff reports also indicated the state law was amended. However, these reasons given for the repeal do not appear accurate. The city's code adopted 36512C3, which specifies a special election to fill the vacancy, and the language of C3 has not been amended. See C3 below and compare the language to the code. See also Assembly Bill 952, which amended Section 36512B2A. It did not amend the law adopted in the code, i.e. Section 36512C3, see AB 952 attached. The April 14, 2020 proposed ordinance states that council is required to follow 36512B2A. However, other provisions of 36512 that may be necessary to employ, such as a special election, are not identified in the new ordinance. Will the absence of such language prevent council from choosing a special election? 5, because an appointee is voting for an ordinance that would allow him to stay in office longer than potentially allowed, would Beatty's votes be invalid if it turns out the city should have replaced him with a candidate with election? I'm done.
Okay, perfect. Is there any more public comments?
Not on that item.
Okay. Then I'll bring it back to the council. Actually, I'd go to Melinda Stewart. Would you like to give us an update on what you'd like to talk about?
Sure. I'll do my best. There's a lot to unpack there, but I'm trying to whittle it down to its kind of most basic concerns. First of all, I will say that the item with respect to, or the concerns with respect to Councilmember Beatty's appointment are not part of the action tonight and not what's before you. I will, after my comments, I will address it briefly, but that's not something that the council is being asked to address tonight. But so obviously there have been some questions about our existing code provisions related to filling the vacancies and the fact that our code requires any appointment to be followed by a special election. And so I'll try and shed some light on that. So our current ordinance, the one we're recommending repealing tonight, does require an appointment to fill a vacancy to be followed by a special election, regardless of when during the term of office that vacancy occurs. Our ordinance basically gives the council the choice to conduct that election either at a general, basically a statewide election, like the one we just had this past March, or at the next municipal election, like the one coming up in November. One of the concerns about the practical application of those provisions is that it can lead to a situation where a vacancy is filled by appointment and the next municipal election coincides with the expiration of the term of the vacancy that was filled. And thereby that makes that election moot. And that's what happened in the case of Councilmember Beatty. By repealing the current municipal code section, the city would revert to state laws on filling vacancies. The state law, I think has been mentioned a few times, is found in Government Code Section 36152, subsection B. That section allows city councils to choose between calling a special election at the next regularly established, basically statewide election, that's 114 days or more from the call of the special election. Well, actually, it could either occur at a statewide election or at a general municipal election. Or the city council could choose to fill by an appointment. And if it fills by an appointment, a special election would be required only if the vacancy occurred in the first half of the term, but more than 114 days before a general municipal election, so the local election like our November election. If the vacancy occurred in the second half of the term, it would be filled for the remainder of the term and no special election would be required. So that's the primary difference between our code and what state law allows. What happened is the section I just read about filling this vacancy by appointment and requiring a special election depending on when during the vacancy, when during the term of office the vacancy occurred. That section of the government code, that was what was recently amended in 2016, I want to say. Before that, we had a situation where a vacancy occurred in a city council position very early in the term, with 3.5 years left on the term. At that time, the government code provisions, which we relied on, did not allow for a filling a vacancy by appointment, then to be followed by a special election. So the choice was solely fill it by special election, which at the time was very costly, or fill it by appointment for the long 3.5-year term. At that point, the council made the decision then to fill it for the 3.5-year term, but I don't think they were all that comfortable with filling by appointment for such a long term. That's why the council, a few years later, decided to amend our municipal code and add the provisions that are there now for filling a vacancy. Because the government code has been since amended and allows for a smoother process to fill a vacancy by appointment. And because we were considering a vacancy policy, it appeared to be a good time to repeal our code section and go back to the government code. So, that's, I think, hopefully that clarifies some of what we're doing and why we're doing it. With respect to Councilmember Beatty's appointment, I'm confident that his appointment is valid. That said, the process that we followed wasn't as smooth or documented as well as perhaps it should have been, and so that's a learning lesson. But as a practical matter, the City Council initially made the choice between an appointment process and a special election process. The special election in that case would have been held at the recent March 2020 statewide election. The council, again, chose to go with the appointment process. So the city's municipal code does now, and did at the time, require an appointment to be followed by a special election. But because the city council had already determined not to hold a special election at the statewide election, the default election was the upcoming municipal election. However, because the term of the vacated seat expires, the seat that Councilmember Beatty is now holding expires at the same time as the municipal election, the election became moot. And therefore the city council never called a special election. So unfortunately, that course of action was not documented as well as it should have been. But I have no doubt that the spirit, if not the black letter of the municipal code, was followed, and that Councilmember Beatty's appointment is valid. So I guess those are my comments on that issue. Mm-hmm.
Does any council member want to speak, or I'll entertain motion?
Yeah, if nobody's going to speak, I'll make a motion that we move 6B.
I'll second it. Can we have a roll call vote?
Councilmember Harris?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I was on mute. Sorry. Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beatty?
Aye.
Mayor Rolette?
Aye. We'll move to item 6D. It was pulled for a comment from the floor. I'll start with council members. Does any council member want to speak on this item, or do you want to just move to the floor? Let's move to the floor. Go ahead.
Okay, the questions were, please advise what constitutes a new project. Is it after a defined period of time or when the finances are not there? And then what determines when a new environmental needs to be completed? And also, when will the tower be camouflaged and what means will be employed to do so?
Is that everything?
That's everything.
Is there any more comments from the floor?
I have one hand. I'll go ahead and unmute it just in case they wanted to speak on this matter.
Do you want to talk on 6D, item 6D? If not,
no, I want to speak on 7 and 8A.
Okay, well, we're not there yet. I'm going to close the comments from the floor, and then I'll ask City Manager, who's going to field the questions? Is Sean Cunningham here?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Sean Cunningham, Public Works Director, is available to answer those questions.
Sean, can you answer those questions?
Yeah, actually, Tim Burke is here, and he'll be addressing that question.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm surmising that the person who wrote this question is asking whether there will be a further project to have further camouflage of the original Drake's Tower. As you know, the contractor has proceeded to install the tower and the support building up on Drake's Peak. We put the support building kind of tucked into the hillside, and the tower was erected, pushed back into try to be hidden by the existing trees. There were some definite concerns over the road that goes up to the tower, specifically the last portion that was put in to construct the facility. That has since been restored to more of a natural state. It's been seeded for grass to be grown. I believe it's grown in pretty well. I went out there today just to look from the kind of the street view all the way down near San Leon Drive, and couldn't really tell that there was any kind of established construction road. So I believe it's been filled in pretty well and pretty well camouflaged. I'm not
okay,
sure.
Thank you.
All of his questions.
So I had a question.
Councilwoman Harris?
Yes, thank you. Since the completion of the tower and all the mitigation efforts for camouflaging it, other than tonight, have we received comments regarding the final product?
So we did.
Okay. Go ahead, Tim.
I apologize. We did receive this email that was read by Michelle.
Right, but I guess my point was, have there been others along the way, or is this it?
Oh.
Because we had said quite a while back that if it was not camouflaged, well enough, we would revisit the issue. So if this is one comment and not, a multitude of them, that sort of tells us, we've done a good job with it. But my question is, has anyone else complained other than tonight?
So this is Mayor Roulette. I'll take the rest of this comment. So during that time, obviously there was a lot of advocates that lived over there, residents that lived over there. A lot of them reached out afterwards and said that it was obviously different than it was portrayed, and that it's not as obtrusive as they thought it was going to be. So to answer your question from my perspective is, I feel like everybody felt it's well enough. They're not asking for it. Well, I haven't heard of anybody asking for it. I've asked the same questions because I was the council member that moved it to ask staff if we come back and camouflage it better. No one has come back and talked about needing to camouflage it better from my perspective.
All right, thank you.
If there's no other comments, I'll entertain motion for item 6D.
Mayor, I have a public comment. I'd like to open their mic, if that's okay.
Yeah, the public comment's closed. So I have Beatty made a motion. I believe Harris made a second. Is that right, Harris?
I made the motion, but I don't care one way or the other.
Sure,
Second,
one way or the other. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yes.
Vice Chair Beatty?
Aye.
Mayor Rolette?
Aye. We'll move to item 6J. And I believe Harris pulled this first. So Harris, would you like to start?
Yeah, I received a few emails regarding this particular item, and some of it had to do with, wanting to have a transparency ongoing with OPEB, and I understand that. I really do think that it's appropriate to suspend this particular group for a period of time. Our staff is incredibly busy with all the COVID-19, work that has to be done and budget work that's also very related to this. So, but there was some concern from some public that, number one, they wanted to know what is our staff working on, what kind of, transparency will there be down the road? Will we still get our completion of time, to which, I know we're all going to agree that, yeah, we're going to complete the time. But it just, I had more than a couple of questions on this. So I wanted to bring it to the attention and have a response either from our city manager or from you in terms of moving forward on this.
Okay. Sullivan, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I have a couple comments and questions. My questions are kind of similar to Dilena's. I have a couple big concerns. My first big concern is I think we're going to be on the verge of a financial crisis. I think sales tax revenues dried up, production's down, hotels are empty, so there's no TOT. So I think anything that we're doing that is in the fiscal arena or saving some money or growing revenues, we need to be doing now. And so I have some serious concerns about suspending this work group based on the fact that it could result in revenue increases or possible cost savings. So I'm not really a big fan of that, but I also understand that staff are running around doing tons of stuff right now. So I'd kind of like to hear too on the staff piece in terms of the folks that were working on this group, whether or not COVID really is going to be an impact to them or not. And I have a feeling it probably is, but if it's not, I do think it is prudent that we get this done. The second piece of this is continuity of this work group. So Jeremy, the previous city manager, did the bulk of the work from what I understood. And I think that with his departure, us suspending this group now and restarting it several months from now is going to really lead to some kind of disjointed information and some disjointed process. So I think as him leaving, we either need to continue through while the information is fresh and there's other staff who are there that could fill in and kind of support that. Or we need to restart the process at a later date, because him leaving and us putting a big gap in the middle of this is not a smart thing to do for this process from my vantage point. So I would like to either do one of those two options, but I'm wondering if staff could potentially let us know if they have the capacity to keep going with this if needed.
Okay, do we have any public comments from the floor? I believe we have one, right?
That's correct, Mayor. Michelle will read that into the record now.
Can we get the clock started also?
Okay. This is from Wendy Brecken. I question the reason that the OPEB advisory meetings has to be suspended. The homeless roundtable meetings continue to proceed safely via Zoom. There is no reason the OPEB advisory meetings could not do the same thing. The committee is progressing by looking at available information via experts. The citizens and staff were working together to obtain a more detailed 5-year plan to verify the sustainability of the current plan and asking 2 consultants to look at other viable healthcare options. This work can continue without concerns of social distancing. In addition, while some staff may have more work due to COVID-19, it is unclear if the staff in question have additional COVID-19 work. that prevents advisory committee work. At this time, when revenues from sales taxes are crashing, it appears to be the perfect time to determine whether there are reasonable alternatives to 85% of the CalPERS Kaiser rate.
Is that it?
There's a little bit, oh no, that's good. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comments. And I do believe, Mr. City Manager, do we have someone that can answer Sullivan and Harris's question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, our interim assistant city manager, Don Leonardini, will be prepared to respond to that.
Hi, good evening. It's Dawn Leonardini. To answer the question from Councilwoman Harris, the staff right now really has been busy. Really about 100% of our time has been focused on COVID-19. I'm sure everybody knows that's listening to this, but we're in an emergency situation. We do have our Emergency Operations Center activated, and based on the declaration of the council adoption, we do have certain things that aren't able to get done right now because we're focused on trying to provide a safe work environment for our employees as well as community for all of our citizens. So that's really what our efforts have been. In terms of our timeline, our intent on the advisory committee is to get back to it. If you take a look at the staff report, originally council had authorized us to work for about 120 days on this particular committee. We've met for, it's been a total of 57 days. So we've got 63 days remaining. And quite frankly, right now, we do not have the staff capacity to focus on this effort. And so our intent would be to basically pick up where we left off. So hopefully that answers some of those questions. And Councilman Sullivan, your question about the continuity of the work group, I can assure you that the continuity is there. I have been at every meeting. I'm part of the staff, and my team, which is Jessica Bose, who's the HR division manager, she is quite frankly, our expert on all things OPEB related, and she's been at all of the meetings and staffing that. And then also Ken Matsumiya, who's our finance division manager, he is attending those meetings as well. So the three of us are primarily the staff that have been supporting the committee and have been doing all of the work behind the scenes, as well as everything preparing for the actual meetings themselves. And so I'm not concerned about the continuity of the work group. I think we're in good shape. I think in all fairness to the committee, I know they've put a lot of time and effort into it as well. But right now, staff, my team, the three of us that I mentioned, we do not have the capacity to work on this particular topic right now. So that's why we're requesting that it be suspended so that we can focus on the things at hand right now. Like I said, with COVID-19, we have daily meetings with EOC being activated, and we're daily dealing with all sorts of issues that come up in terms of interpretation of new laws, regulations, those types of things that really impact our operation. So that's where our focus is right now, which is why we just really cannot do anything related to the committee.
Thank you, Dawn.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just expand on one of the points Dawn made, if that's okay, sir.
Is this Bush?
Yes, it is, sir.
Okay, go ahead.
So thank you. Just to elaborate a little bit on that, because I know that when you think of a pandemic crisis or an emergency operation, how does finance and human resources fit into that equation? And I can assure you they are very active in this effort. Everything we do has to be tracked from a monetary standpoint, all the forms. We're pursuing FEMA reimbursements, which requires all kinds of levels of effort on our finance team. And then Don also mentioned the new laws that have come out for care for our employees. And so that is taking a lot of time to make sure that we are in compliance with new state and federal laws regarding our employees. So our Human Resources Department is very active on a daily basis. So I wish we had more time, and we look forward to this pandemic being over so that we can get back to business as usual. And we believe that pushing this off will help us get that done and be able to give the attention to this that it deserves. So thank you.
Thank you. Sullivan, did you have a comment?
This is Dylan. I did.
Okay, Harris, go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to say to Dawn and to Aaron, thank you very much for all the work that you are doing. I know it's a considerable amount, and I appreciate you taking the time to express those constraints that you and your team have, so that the public is very aware and can understand the suspension for this committee. I do want to say also that, given the lack of knowledge at this point of how the COVID-19 economic impact is going to, hit us as a city, it'd be really difficult to continue the OPEB conversation just based on that, because there is no understanding of where we're going to be 4 weeks from now, 6 weeks from now, whatever the case. Hopefully, we're going to get some type of, funding from the federal government to help support what we've had to do to, keep things running without having the ability to have our sales tax and property tax and what have you, and be able to stay on top of that. So thank you for what you're doing. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to when this is over as well, so that we can get back on track. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Harris, do you want to make a motion then to suspend the group?
Yeah, if there's no one else that has a comment, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
I'll take the motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
80 second. Roll call vote.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yeah. Yes.
Vice Mayor Beatty?
Aye.
Mayor Rolette?
Aye. We'll move to item 7, business from the floor. This is time to address the council with issues that are not on this agenda, but are within the subject matter jurisdiction. I believe we have one person on the line.
Yes. Yes, we do. My name is George Gwynn. As I think you know, I'm an advocate for the taxpayer. And I'd like to talk about what a disaster this has been for both the taxpayer and I think for your particular agency. I think it's going to be a disaster because there's a lot of businesses that have been put out of business, the restaurant business in particular, but there's others. And you're probably going to be subject to some lawsuits for getting some of the money lost at some point, and it may drag on for 5 years. I think the public has taken a big hit because they used to be able to come to public meetings, and now they have to be computer literate. They have to also have the equipment, a computer and a telephone. Also have to be willing to pay money to call in. It doesn't cost me anything, but there are people that comment that I know that are not now because it costs 7.5 cents a minute for the connection to the San Jose number that they had to call in tonight. I think that the rights of the public took a big hit on the First and Fourth Amendment. You're presumed guilty until otherwise, as far as having COVID-19. And if you look at the statistics that the health department has, the county health department I'm talking about, the number of people that are actually subject to COVID-19 are pretty small in proportion to the 430,000 people in the county. But the biggest hit is the economics and also the hit to the rights of the public. It's one thing if it's a temporary thing, but if this thing drags on for any length of time, it's going to be really disaster. I'm surprised that where the public hasn't complained about it, because the freedom that people have in this country is what really makes the country great. If we don't have any freedom, we're no better than some third world dictatorship. So I really hope we can get back to normal soon, and maybe you guys could open up to the public with 6 foot spacing between people. I think that would work a lot better than the present situation. The ADA people are getting slighted on this also, by the way. So if that was done, it would be a lot better. Thank you very much.
Any other public comments?
Yes, hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi. So my name is Nolan Adams. I work for Pacific Coast Farmers Market Association. I met a couple of you guys last year, and I'm going to be the market manager there again this year. I just kind of wanted to talk to you guys. I know there's a lot of concerns, and as far as safety and making sure people are having their distance. And I just kind of wanted to see if there's any comments or questions or concerns that I can answer. I've been working with Brooke Fox on this, and I gave her a bunch of information regarding the requirements that we're gonna have in place that the Solano County Health has given us. We have a modified version of the farmers market that we're gonna have. We're not allowing people to touch produce. We're having all of our producers have face masks, hand washing stations. So I just want to kind of reassure that you guys that we're not trying to host an event. We're trying to provide a food source for people, especially now with these crazy times. I know access to food is a little bit harder, and so we want it to be as safe as possible, and just kind of reassure to you guys that we're taking all the necessary steps. And I know that we have a tentative date for May 2nd, and I just wanted to reiterate that we're doing everything we can to keep the public safe and following all the guidelines from the health department. So if you have any questions, if you have any questions, concerns, Brooke has all my information. You guys can reach out to me through email, or she can give me my phone number. I'll let her know. You guys can call me directly. So
thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to shut public comments down. Move to item 8A. Mr. City Manager, would you like to start us off?
I'm sorry, just a moment. Our city clerk had a notification.
I have some email comments, yes.
Okay, well, for public comment?
For public comment, yes. I'm sorry, we missed that. Here we go.
That's okay.
Okay, so the first one asks 3 questions from Darlene Burns. Wondering what updates will the council share regarding the COVID statistics of Vacaville, those infected, and any we may have lost to the virus? Her second question is, what is the status of our community emergency management program? And her final question is, where is the greatest need for community assistance in Vacaville?
Okay, any other public comments?
Yes, I have 2 more.
Okay.
One's from Wendy Brecken. She says, during this unprecedented pandemic, I am asking you to do everything in your power to provide personal protective equipment, PPE, including N95 masks, to the healthcare workers on the front line. I hear that our healthcare workers do not have the necessary equipment to safely do their jobs. Have you inquired into this? If true, perhaps we can ask those in the construction and painting industry, dental offices, and other relevant businesses to provide N95 masks for healthcare workers. Perhaps state and federal officials and legislatures could also be contacted to ensure that Vacaville's hospitals obtain necessary funding and equipment. In addition, the city should be making every effort to obtain testing equipment so that as many of its residents as possible are tested. Without a test, residents do not know if they have immunity or may be contagious. Without this knowledge, residents cannot know if it is safe to see family, friends, or work. Testing is necessary to get back to the new normal. That concludes Wendy's comments. The last one is a letter from Brooke Fox. On behalf of my board of directors and 600-member businesses, we're seeking council support to open a modified version of the Vacaville Farmers Market at Creekwalk Plaza, Andrews Park, as early as May 2nd. As you may know, farmers markets were deemed essential and allowed to operate as per our state stay-at-home order. Now more than ever, it is imperative we continue to provide our community with access to healthy fruits and vegetables and support our local agriculture producers. In order to ensure a safe market environment, several modifications to the market will be made. No sampling will be allowed and new restrictions will be placed on food producers. We are working closely with our market operator, Pacific Coast Farmers Market Association, to launch the market under the new guidelines. They are currently running markets all over Northern California, including in the city of San Francisco. They also recently worked with Solano County health officials to reopen the farmers market in Vallejo under these new guidelines. A full copy of those guidelines can be provided upon a request. Since the market
Thank you very much. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Since the market would be taking place on City of Vacaville property, we are seeking council support to open the market as early as May 2nd. We understand that operating the market under these conditions would be a privilege, and that privilege could be reasonably revoked at any time during the season if the city feels public safety guidelines are not being followed at the market. The market is a downtown Vacaville tradition for over 25 years. We hope you share our belief that with careful attention to the ever-changing public health guidelines, the market can return as a vital fresh food resource for our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. No other public comments?
That's it from us.
Okay. We'll move to item 8A, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This next item is an urgency ordinance enacting a temporary moratorium on evictions due to non-payment of rent for residential and commercial tenants where the failure to pay rent results from income loss resulting from the COVID-19 virus. Our City Attorney, Melinda Stewart, will make a presentation now.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the Council. The City Manager just explained the item before you. One preliminary comment before I get into the presentation is just to advise you that because this is an urgency ordinance and it's for the protection of health, safety, and welfare, it does require a 4/5 vote to pass. And once, if and when it is passed, it becomes effective immediately. That's why it requires the higher vote. Next slide, please. Oops, back. There we go, perfect. So just some real brief background. Obviously, we're experiencing a worldwide pandemic related to the COVID-19 virus. As a result, there have been a number of emergency proclamations and declarations that have been made. There's a national emergency declaration. There's a statewide state of emergency declaration, a Solano County emergency proclamation, and a City of Vacaville emergency proclamation. As a result, and to stop the spread of the virus and to protect health and safety, there have been several shelter-at-home and stay-at-home orders issued. The ones we're operating under are the Solano County shelter-at-home order that took effect March 18th, and it runs through April 30th at this time. And the California governor issued a stay-at-home order, and that's effective until further notice. Both orders basically require people to stay at home, except in order to participate in essential activities such as grocery shopping, medical appointments, going to and performing essential jobs. And then when they're out of their homes, when people are out of their homes, they're required to observe social distancing measures. So again, the social distancing and the stay-at-home orders have been necessary to stop the spread of the COVID-19 virus. And they're in the interest of public health. And of course, we as a city, as a governmental entity, want to encourage those measures. However, we understand they do come with a variety of local impacts. Next slide. So some of those impacts are the result of illness. People are out of work due to the virus, having the virus themselves. People also miss work because they're caring for family members. A number of events have been canceled. Actually, all events, large and small, have been canceled. And that creates a loss of revenue for the event itself and for supporting businesses and for employees that support those businesses. Non-essential businesses have been forced to close temporarily or to severely limit their operations. Of course, that results in temporary and potentially permanent layoffs of employees. It also results in decreases in personal and business income, as well as an increase in unemployment. And also schools have been closed, at least in this area, for the remainder of the academic year, which has forced some parents to have to stay home and homeschool and care for their children. So ultimately, this results in a situation where individuals, families, and businesses are struggling to pay rent. Next slide, please. So there have been some attempts to address this situation and the economic impact at both the state and the county levels. The governor has issued a couple of executive orders. The first order is Executive Order N28-20. That was issued on March 16, 2020. That allows cities through their police power to adopt and enforce residential and commercial eviction moratoriums for the non-payment of rent related to COVID-19. And it also prevents certain residential evictions and re-rental actions until May 31st. The second order was Executive Order N37-20, which was issued on March 27, 2020. That provides for a 60-day response time to respond to an eviction proceeding when the tenant meets certain criteria. So typically, a response to an eviction proceeding, an unlawful detainer action, has to be filed within 5 days. And so this extends that period of time to 60 days. It only applies to residential evictions, not commercial. And it doesn't prohibit evictions, it just extends deadlines to respond. Next slide, please. So some of the actions at the county level and the state court level, the county court and the state court level. So on March 17th, the Solano County Superior Court suspended processing eviction actions through April 3rd. And then on April 2nd, they extended that suspension and suspended trial settings and eviction actions for the period of the emergency. Then on April 6th, the Judicial Council governs creates rules that govern all courts in the state of California. So the Judicial Council issued an order suspending eviction actions and judicial foreclosures until 90 days after the termination of the state of emergency. Next slide, please. So all that's a preface to our ordinance. So that's what's happened with the state and the county level. It's kind of what's led us to some of the economic impacts, or what has led us to proposing this ordinance. So some of the key points of the urgency ordinance that's before you tonight. So it applies to both residential and commercial tenants. It's a temporary moratorium on evictions. It's effective immediately and expires at the latter of May 31st, which was the date in the governor's executive order, or the expiration of any state, county, or local emergency. And the reason there's kind of that tiered termination date is because if the governor's order terminates on May 31st, but one of the county orders or one of the local state or county or stay-at-home orders extends past that date, then tenants are still in a situation where they can't make money, businesses are not getting business, and they're still not going to be able to pay the rent. So we wanted to set the termination date as far out as we could to protect the tenants in that case. Another point, so the tenant must show to the landlord that their inability to pay rent is the result of a substantial loss of income, and that loss of income is due to the COVID-19 pandemic or the government's response to that pandemic. And so you see some of the situations on the screen that would cause a substantial loss of income. Household income would be personal illness, caring for an ill household member, loss of job or work closure, school cancellation. So those are some pieces of evidence. And as far as business income, we're looking at work closures, reduction in available staff, reduction in operating hours, and compliance with health orders. Next slide, please. Some further key points. The tenant must notify the landlord of the tenant's inability to pay within 30 days of the due date, although they're encouraged to notify the landlord as soon as possible. So this time frame is flexible. We did receive a letter from I think it's the apartment complex, California Apartment Association, thank you, that suggests that 30-day time frame is too long. The governor does have a 7-day time frame in one of the executive orders. Our reasoning behind the 30 days is so that this ordinance would be applicable to rent that was due in April. But there is some flexibility if you want to change the length of notification, if you want to shorten it to something like 15 days, 16 days, 7 days. So that is a decision point you might want to consider. Also, unpaid rent, the rent that was not paid during the moratorium period is due within 6 months after expiration of the moratorium period. Again, the California Apartment Association questions that length of time. They think it's too long. They suggest a 90-day repayment period after the expiration of the moratorium. And they also suggest setting up a payment schedule. So for instance, 25% of the past due rent would be due in the first month, 25% would be due, 30 days later, et cetera. So there are other ordinances in other jurisdictions that have 90-day repayment periods up to 6 months repayment periods. So you have some flexibility with that time frame. The other thing the proposed ordinance does is it prohibits imposition of late fees or failing to pay rent for the allowed reasons during the moratorium period. And it makes the enforcement of the ordinance is as an affirmative defense to an eviction action. So that would be something that the tenant could raise if, in fact, the landlord brought an eviction action based on their failure to pay rent, or the tenant could file their own civil suit. So there would be no enforcement measures that would need to be taken by the city. And the last item that you see there is if you choose to move this ordinance forward, I would propose a correction to Section 3, subsection F, by adding the phrase, quote, during the eviction moratorium period, close quote, after the words, quote, non-payment of rent, close quote, in the second line. And you can see a second line of subsection F. You can see on the screen how that reads in full. And that's just to clarify steps that the landlord must take to file an eviction action, only apply to evictions due to failure to pay rent while the moratorium is in place. So it's just kind of a clarification item. And let's see. I want to see if there was one more item I wanted to address with respect to this letter. So the California Apartment Association did request that we clarify how the tenant can inform the landlord of the inability to pay rent. I wanted to point out that in Section 3E of the proposed ordinance, we do address that by requiring the tenant to notify the landlord in writing. And it also specifies that allows for email and text that would be considered writings. It's not completely clear, although I think it's assumed that writing also includes a letter. So we could add that to the ordinance just to clarify if that were your preference. And then two other items that are brought up in the letter from the California Apartment Association. One is the city should set aside funding to provide short-term rental assistance. The other is the city should consider sending a letter to state and congressional delegations requesting emergency funding for tenants and landlords. Both of those items are not really addressed in this particular eviction moratorium. They are policy issues that we could discuss internally and come back and bring a recommendation to you if you're so interested, but they are not addressed in the ordinance. So next slide, please. So our recommendation tonight is that the City Council adopts the subject urgency ordinance enacting a temporary moratorium on COVID-19 related residential and commercial evictions, including the proposed change to Section 3, subsection F. And that concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions.
So I had a question.
Harris?
Yeah. When you look at that letter, Melinda, it said to amend the term of the urgency ordinance to be consistent with the governor's executive order, having 3 separate layers of regulation. So, you know, there's a lot of legalese here, but does what staff is recommending actually, you know, meet that?
Well, so we do recommend that the moratorium itself expire on May 31st, which is consistent with the governor's executive order, or if one of the shelter-at-home orders is still in effect, then it would expire later. So it's not identical to the state's date, but I do think it gives tenants protection for the full extent of the emergency. And I don't think it's inconsistent. I don't think we're precluded from doing that.
So I also had someone else send me an email in regards to, and I don't know if this is something everybody received, I'm assuming it is, but it was asking whether the city can discourage or mandate landlords not report delinquent renters to credit bureau agencies during this moratorium. And I don't know legally whether that's something that we can or cannot look at. So that's one thing. The other thing is I am concerned about property owners, and I would like to bring something back later to maybe have this council make a request from city or from state and federal government that there's some protection for property owners, because property owners are really going to take a hit in this. You know, renters will, but property owners will too. And so having some type of relief for property owners is probably going to be, you know, a big request moving forward. So I would like to do something to consider that in the future if the council, you know, feels so inclined.
Okay, very good. And with respect to the request to landlords not to report tenants that are delinquent on their rents, I mean, we can certainly include that type of request. I don't know that we can require them not to report the delinquent tenants, although under our ordinance, they wouldn't be delinquent because it actually kind of suspends their ability or their requirement to pay rent until this emergency is over. So okay, I think that,
got it.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to open it up to public comment.
I have a question and a comment as well.
Do you want to wait till I'm done with public comment, or do you want to comment now?
Yeah, I'll wait.
Okay. Do we have any public comment?
Hi, this is George Gwynn. I think the way this is written, it's devastation for the property owner / landlord. Everybody else is getting help, but the owner of the property. The owner of the property is who's paying the property tax. And if this thing goes on very long, I think you're going to see a lot of dominoes that are going down. It's not going to be a very pretty picture. Back after World War II, rent control was invoked in New York City, and a lot of property owners walked away from their buildings because they couldn't break even. And the same thing could happen in this community. So I think that if the landlord doesn't get any consideration, it's not going to be good for anybody. It doesn't create a better neighborhood for people. It doesn't create a better economy. And it also doesn't go along with capitalism, which this country was founded on. That's the totally socialistic thing, and socialism doesn't work very well. It's a very temporary thing. So I really hope that you guys will make some modifications to help the owners of the property before this is concluded. And also, if people eat properly and get rest and take care of themselves, you wouldn't have much of a problem with COVID-19. So this could be resolved very quickly, and if it's not, it's going to be a disaster. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Close the floor for public comment and bring it back to Councilmember Sullivan.
I think my comments are the same as Councilmember Harris's. I really like the eviction piece that she tossed in there, the comment about that, but the comment Melinda made about that actually kind of being solved by this order is great. So I'm fine with that. I do think that to the extent possible, this is probably one instance where I'm actually asking for kind of less of a benefit. We should pair our ordinance to the governor's ordinance and the ordinance of the state. I don't think we should go beyond that. So I think when it comes to the timing difference, I understand what staff was trying to do, and I appreciate that. But I do think to some extent we shouldn't go broader than the state's proposed ordinance. I just think that'll get us in trouble later. So I like the fact that it's tied to the shelter-in-place order, but I do think we should dial back anywhere there's discrepancies between our proposed ordinance and the ordinance that was presented by the state of California.
You want to make that in a form of motion?
Yes, I move that we instruct staff to edit the motion to match the state order and approve that order.
Do I have a second? All those in favor, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Beatty?
Aye.
Mayor Roulette?
Aye. We'll move to item 8B. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, out of an abundance of caution, I'd like the city clerk to read the title.
Oh, Mrs. City Clerk, would you please read the title?
Thank you.
An urgency ordinance enacting a temporary moratorium on evictions due to non-payment of rent for residential and commercial tenants where the failure to pay rent results from income loss resulting from the novel coronavirus, COVID-19.
Thank you. We'll move to item 8B, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Item 8B is approval of Vacaville Housing Authority Housing Choice Voucher, Public Housing Agency 5-year and annual plan. Emily Cantu and Tamara Colden from our Housing Department are here to make a presentation.
Hello, this is Tamara Colden. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
All right, great. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The Vacaville Housing Authority administers the Department of Housing and Urban Development Housing Choice Voucher Program for the City of Vacaville. The Housing Choice Voucher Program contributes over $11 million each year into the local economy and assists low-income families with maintaining safe, decent, and affordable housing. the Vacaville Housing Authority must submit a 5-year agency plan and annual plan to HUD to continue to administer the Housing Choice Voucher Program. The 5-year agency plan, covering the period from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2025, describes the mission of the Vacaville Housing Authority and sets the goals, objectives, and policies of the Vacaville Housing Authority, while the annual plan, covering the period from July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, provides a more detailed report on the status of meeting those goals and objectives, revised policy since the last Vacaville Housing Authority annual plan, as well as any new activities proposed in the upcoming year. Some of the Vacaville Housing Authority accomplishments included in the plans this year are increasing the monthly number of available vouchers from 1,193 to 1,239 vouchers, implementing new housing quality standard inspection software to streamline process and provide improved customer service, and implementing triennial recertifications for participants with 90% of their income from a fixed source. The plans were made available for the 45-day comment period, and the Vacaville Housing Authority is now requesting that Council, as the Housing Authority Board, hold the required public hearing and consider approval of the plans. With that, I'd be happy to accept any questions or comments from the board or the public regarding the plan.
Any council comments? I'll open up public comment. Do we have any public comment?
No written comment.
Okay. Hearing no public comment, we'll close public comment and entertain motion.
Move approved.
Harris and Sullivan. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Beatty?
Aye.
Mayor Roulette?
Aye. We'll move to item 9A, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. This next item is the 2019 Annual General Plan Progress Report. Barton Briley and Tyra Hayes from our Community Development Department are here to make a presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. So as our City Manager has mentioned, tonight I'm going to present to you the 2019 Annual Status Report of the General Plan, or as I prefer to call it, our General Plan Implementation Plan. I'm sorry, there we go. I was looking for my slides. Next slide, please. So the General Plan Implementation Plan includes all of the city's general plan actions, all of the energy and conservation action strategy measures, all of the general plan EIR mitigation measures, and lastly, it includes all the housing programs identified in our existing housing element, which is one of the 7 mandated elements of our general plan. The reason we are preparing this report for you tonight is because this is a state mandated document, and it was created with the intent of ensuring that the city actively reviews, uses, and amends the general plan on a continuous basis. It is the idea to have this be a living document. In addition to making sure that the city is routinely looking at their general plan to ensure that it meets its city goals, it's also intended to make sure that the city is compliant with whatever applicable state laws. Next slide, please. So in addition to keeping a accounting of the approximately 375 to-do list items that's identified in the report before you, this report also includes an accounting of all the general plan amendments that took place last year, and it also accounts for all the general plan amendments that were initiated that have yet to be acted upon. In 2019, there were 2 completed general plan amendments. One was a general plan amendment to change the land use designation for the Casa de Vista apartment site located on Allison Drive. As part of that change, we had changed the land use designation of the general plan from mixed use and office commercial to high density residential. That project is currently under construction. In addition to that general plan amendment, the city also did numerous citywide rezonings throughout the city to ensure general plan consistency between the zoning code, the zoning map, and the general plan land use designation. Next slide, please. So we had several general plan amendments initiated last year. And of those, you can see the locations of those you can see the location of the projects identified on the map before you. Starting in the upper left-hand corner, one general plan amendment was initiated to change the land use designation of the general plan for the McMurtry Estates project, changing that land use designation from agricultural hillside to residential estates. Another general plan amendment was initiated for the Buzz Oats property located on, I think it's Piper and Vacaville Parkway. As part of that general plan amendment request, they are requesting to change the general plan designation from general commercial to industrial. There is another general plan amendment initiated for phase 2 of the North Village project, which is located closer to Midway Road. We had another general plan amendment initiated for Green Tree, and that request included numerous changes, not only to the general plan land use designation, but also to various general plan policies. Lastly, we had a request to change the general plan land use designation for Park Parish located in the Southtown development. And as part of that request, they are requesting to change the land use designation from neighborhood commercial to medium density residential. Next slide, please. So another component of the report before you tonight is an accounting of the various implementation tasks that were completed last calendar year. There were several completed, but we're kind of focusing tonight on the high priority projects. Last year, we did complete, well, technically it was this year, but we did complete our downtown connectivity and streetscape design plan. That is one of the major components of the downtown specific plan, which we'll talk about momentarily. As I mentioned, we also completed doing citywide rezonings to ensure consistency between the zoning map as well as the general plan land use designation. And we also adopted new residential design requirements. All of these were required as part of the identified general plan actions. Next slide, please. So we have several additional general plan implementation tasks currently underway. And the ones identified on the slide before you are also the same ones that we are recommending remain the priority implementation tasks through the year 2020. Those top priority tasks include the completion of our AB 1600 development impact-based study. It's my understanding that we are anticipating having that done sometime mid to late year. We are currently working on doing a comprehensive update to our zoning code. We are anticipating having that complete sometime this summer or early fall. And as I alluded to earlier, we are currently working on our downtown specific plan. We have completed one component of it, as mentioned previously. That's our downtown connectivity and streetscape design plan. But there's several other components that address various components that have been identified as tasks by our general plan. To summarize some of those implementation tasks, they really focus on economic development, focusing on improving pedestrian, bicycle, and transit connectivity, and focusing on providing various housing opportunities within our downtown. Next slide, please. So now we're going to move into the portion of our report that talks about our housing element and our housing element housing policies. Next slide, please. So the housing element is one of the mandated elements or chapters of our general plan, but it's a little different. Most general plans are updated roughly every 20 years. Our housing element has to be updated every 8 years, and it has very strict requirements in terms of the content it must contain, as well as how we report to the state on an annual basis. So everything you're going to see tonight is reporting on our existing general plan, which covers the planning period between 2015 and 2023. We're not really going to go into the policies, but all the policies within this document have been created to address all income groups. And some of the tables you're going to be seeing are standardized forms that are required by the state. Now, before moving forward, I should mention that not only the housing element report, but also the annual assessment general plan report is due to the state every year by April 1st. Given our current situation with COVID-19, we did receive permission from the state to submit this report early, and it has been submitted to the state. That was done so in mid-March. Any changes to this document resulting from today's discussion will be reflected in the document and resubmitted to the state as early as this week. Next slide, please. So the foundation of our housing element is the Regional Housing Needs Allocation, or RHNA for short. So every 8 years, we are assigned a certain number of housing units that we need to plan for in order to provide for our fair share of housing within our region. So in 2015, we were given the following RHNA numbers. Our total number was to provide for 1,084 units. But the RHNA is further broken down into income groups. We have your very low income groups, affordable to very low income groups, affordable to low income groups, affordable to moderate, and affordable to above moderate groups. So you might be wondering what that means. We will address that in the next slide. So here you see what we need to plan for. Right, the second row will show how many residential permits we have issued this past year and what their affordability level is anticipated to be. So here you see the majority of the 381 residential permits we issued last year were deemed to be affordable to what we call our above moderate income households. The other 3 residential permits that were issued have been deemed to be affordable to low income households, and those were actually accessory dwelling units. So the state does accept that accessory dwelling units are typically affordable to low-income household groups, and they typically will not question us on those. So between 2015 and the current year, you will see how many permits have been issued per each of the income groups. And at the very bottom, you see what our remaining RHNA numbers are. We've done quite well in terms of providing housing for moderate and above moderate income housing groups. But we could use a little bit of help of providing additional housing opportunities for very low and low income households. This isn't as easily done as you would say. It's believed that 97% of all jurisdictions within the state of California has a hard time meeting this requirement. And that is largely due to the fact that we no longer have we do no longer have redevelopment funding to do so. So we're having to be a little more creative in our approach. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, the RHNA number has been broken down into various income groups. The way those income groups is broken down is based on our area median income for the county. In 2019, Solano County's area median income for a family of 4 was $85,700. So with that, doing a little bit of math, we can figure out what the annual income would be for a family of 4 based on whether or not they would be considered an extremely low, very low, low, or moderate income household. Okay, there we go. So what we're showing here is simply a mathematical application like I mentioned. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but just make sure everyone understands what I'm saying. If you look at the 120% moderate row, all we've done there is take the area median income of $85,700 and times it by 120%, which then results in a household income of $102,850. So now, just for illustration purposes, we have to figure out how much can a household making that much money annually can afford to buy. So once again, this is just for illustration purposes because there's a lot of factors that are outside the city's control. Factors such as whether or not a household has debt, and if so, how much debt. So this is a very clean mathematical application. What we've done here is we've taken your annual income. We assume that no more than 30% of that monthly income goes towards housing. This amount does not include utilities or insurance, and it is based on a 30-year mortgage at a 3.56% APR. So staying with the moderate income group and using this mathematical equation that can be found on most realty websites, it has been deemed that a moderate income household of 4 people can afford a house with 20% down in the amount of $531,900. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Before I discuss this slide, one thing I would like to mention, taking it back to your previous slide, based on all the housing permits that were issued last calendar year, it was deemed that all the new construction was beyond the, oh, it's not there anymore, but the $500 and I think it was $31,000 price range, and therefore they were not deemed to be affordable to moderate income households. They are deemed to be affordable only to people making above moderate income households, household incomes. So lastly, as one of our general plan implementation requirements, we have decided that we will do an annual review of the house or the citywide housing unit mix. So general plan policy, land use policy 12.3, as you see on your screen, states that the city should strive to maintain a citywide housing mix of approximately 75% single family homes and a 25% multifamily attached housing ratio. So using information dating back to 2010, we've looked at how many permits have been issued for single family versus multifamily housing projects. And as we currently sit, the city is approximately composed of 80% single family homes and roughly 22% multifamily. I know that goes a little bit over 100%, but that just has to do with some rounding. Next slide, please. So that's a really high-level review of the very lengthy document that everyone has received. That does conclude my presentation, and I am available to answer any questions that the council and or the public may have.
Thank you very much. Public comments. Council, do council have any comments first?
I have several comments, but I can wait for the public.
Okay, thank you. I'll open it up public comments. Do we have any public comments?
We have no written comments, Mayor.
Okay.
I have
Seeing
no
none,
hands.
I'm going to close. I'm sorry?
I have no hands.
Okay. Seeing no more, I will close public comment. I'll go back to Councilmember Sullivan.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to try and be somewhat brief. So I have, this is probably one of the most important issues I think that we as a council are facing in Vacaville. We have a massive housing shortage for folks that are, you know, kind of in that young family, starter family range, or folks looking to downsize. Can you flick back to, I guess it kind of doesn't matter. You did a pretty good job displaying what we're looking at here. Can you go to slide 8? So I think, you know, the principal concept or one of the key element reports that you're trying to talk about here in the general plan, and one of our responsibilities as a city council is to execute a general plan that kind of meets its principal guidelines. And so the fourth bullet point there is policies to address all income groups. And so we're really highlighting this is something that's important. It's something we should be doing, but looking at the data over the last couple of years, this is an area that we continuously struggle to address. And so I know staff has put in this really difficult position in that you don't have redevelopment anymore. There's no more assets, but to some extent, we need to push the envelope and get creative and find some answers. Can you go to the next slide, slide 9, please? So slide 9 again, you know, we're just, the very low and low is actually 2 separate categories. So even looking at on the slide, it looks kind of condensed. We are just, the bulk of Vacaville families that are buying homes are going to be in moderate to very low to low housing statuses. And those are the areas that we're not really touching. I mean, the other concept of that is the missing middle. We have a couple projects coming online. I believe the Stagecoach Senior Apartments. I'm guessing the Eden Housing on Orchard. And I think there's one other project that's going to add quite a bit of inventory, probably in the very low categories. But the areas that I'm most concerned about, can you go one more, the slide where the income is at? This is where I'm really concerned about. You know, most Vacaville families, I think the median Solano income is $85,000. I believe it's somewhere around $80,000 for a Vacaville family. So we're really missing that gap of families that are in that low to the bottom of the moderate category. And I'm not sure what we can do in terms of housing practices, in terms of DIF, in terms of policy, but we are driving a whole generation of workforce into living with their parents, or moving out of town, or staying in their massive ranch style home when they're ready to retire and downsize. And so whatever we can do in this particular area to really beef up that missing middle, we really need to do. Barton made a presentation, I want to say maybe 4 months back. It was a housing presentation, had lots of cool stuff in it. We were told there would be some sort of follow-up, and so I'm hoping that we can have a follow-up with some ideas on how to address that missing middle. My last two comments, and I'll wrap it up, but the first is that I just wanted to thank staff. I know this is kind of an insurmountable challenge that we're tasking you with, and I really do appreciate this information. The document you produced is 157 pages long, and I read all 157 pages, although some of it was older reports that were kind of archived. So I do really appreciate the work, the effort, the data, and the tracking you put in. On page 81 out of the document, there is a part where we talk about rehabbing existing low-income units. This is a question I'd like answered versus my statement. Who is actually tracking that we're not losing low-income inventory? So if we have, let's say, 300 or 3,000 or 30,000 low-income units in the city of Vacaville, who is making sure that that inventory isn't lost over time? Is there anyone watching that?
I don't know if Director Cantu is still on the call, but that is something that our housing department takes care of, and that is something that we do address in our housing element.
Okay, and is there anywhere I can see numbers of whether or not that fluctuates year to year? I want to see like if we're going deficit at all. Because one of the concerns I have is once we build low-income housing, maintaining that inventory, because a lot of these places have a 10, 20, or 30-year kind of contract period where once the contract's up, they can revert to market rate. Is there somewhere in the report that details whether or not we're maintaining that inventory, or if that fluctuates, or would that be an Emily question later?
It's really more of an Emily question. We do keep track of that annually, but right now we don't have that compiled into one document. You'd have to look at the various general plan annual status reports to see that. I will work with Emily as early as tomorrow to see whether or not we can get you a consolidated accounting of what you're asking for.
Okay, great, thank you. And then the last point I wanted to make is I have kind of a principal request for staff, and I'm not sure, really where to put this, but you mentioned the Park Parish project. So the Park Parish project came to us, I don't know, maybe 6, 7, 8 months ago for a general plan change. The developer was lobbying on behalf of the developer. I'm sorry, an agent was lobbying on behalf of the developer to remove some neighborhood commercial to essentially create more houses. And so the logic at the time was, oh yeah, like we want to build some more houses here. The houses, I believe, were probably in the moderate or above moderate category. And the idea was essentially it makes it better for those homeowners to not have a gas station across the street or whatever. So whatever, we made that change, no problem. It was really, really easy. We had Gaspar come to us maybe 2 months ago, and Gaspar presented this amazing project. The product probably will be somewhere in the high moderate range. It's not going to hit that low piece, but I'm guessing the low moderate range. But it is affordable for younger families. And so at the time I made a comment about changing half the zoning there. We had a bunch of commercial zoned in that particular plan. And it just didn't make sense. There's a dying shopping center across the way with a bunch of vacant lots. And there's another shopping center kind of right down the street that has tons of vacancies still too. So neighborhood commercial there really wasn't needed. So I made the point that why couldn't we change this to residential? And I guess the point I'm trying to make is that if we have a developer come forward and wants to change a gas station to build more expensive homes, we jump right at it. But when it comes to the opportunity to rezone and build homes that are affordable for young Vacaville families, we sort of struggle or don't make comments or don't do anything. And I think we as a council and as a staff, we need to really start putting ourselves in a different mindset and making slight changes or adjustments and really focusing on what the general plan is saying, and that is building housing for people of all income brackets. And looking at the numbers, we're not doing that. And so I just want to put some urgency there, and I don't know if anyone else on council agrees with me, but we've got to do something, especially now that people are losing their jobs. The unemployment rate's spiking. If we don't have affordable housing options for people in Vacaville, we thought our homeless problem was bad with tiny sheds. We're going to have a much more exacerbated problem. So I'm really kind of pleading with staff to really focus on creative ideas to hit that extremely low, very low, and low category, and maybe some of the bottom end of the moderate, but we need housing local workforce can afford. And that is the end of my rant. I'm sorry.
All right, thank you very much. Any other council members? I'm going to close the item.
Yeah.
There's no vote. Go ahead, Council Member Harris.
Okay, one of it has to do with process. So there were several general plan amendments that had been brought forward, and I wanted to find out. So there's been applications for those amendments, and in some cases, I guess, approvals for those amendments. What is the process for either approving or not approving? Does it go through the Planning Commission first? I'm trying to remember the process.
Tyra, do you want to answer that?
I'll try to. So they have submitted their applications, and many of them are currently working actively with our planning department. Once we work things out with staff, we do typically take them to planning commission for a recommendation to the city council. So everything you've seen in terms of the initiated general plan amendments, you will see at some point in time.
And I'll just add that. I'll just add that sometimes it's an extensive process to do the environmental reviews and do the other things. That's why there's often a long time frame between an initiation and an actual hearing.
Got it. Okay. So my other question has to do with what Councilmember Sullivan brought up, which is the low and very low housing. And so, you know, there's this statewide approval that we needed to adopt locally for ADUs. Where does that fit into the housing element, or does it fit in? So it'd be interesting to know how many ADUs are, you know, being produced in our city and how that fits in with the housing element.
To answer your question, they absolutely fit into our housing element, and we do have a housing element policy that addresses accessory dwelling units. So I'm not sure what slide it is, but the slide that was showing our RENA number, we showed that we had 3 units that fell into, there we are. We have those 3 units that were issued last year that fall into the very low and low income category. Those are accessory dwelling units. So we have been keeping track of how many accessory dwelling units have been issued permits and which ones have been final.
So that was last year. Were there any in 2018? And, you know, we're going to continue to track them. Okay.
We do have all that information, yes.
Okay, so does it look like we're actually building on that and it's, you know, helping to support? I mean, 3 is not much. It's not much, but is it something that is starting to, you know, create some traction? Because I know it was one of those things that the, you know, realtors were fully behind and wanted everybody to support. And, you know, is it actually making traction in our area?
I can maybe answer that, Tyra. So I think in 2018 we had 8. And in 2020, some of the rules and fees were relaxed, and we've had a number of inquiries, but I think we'll probably get at least half dozen this year. So they're coming in. They're not, you know, we're not getting dozens and hundreds of them, but there are, you know, like that half dozen a year coming in.
One thing I'd like to add too, Barton, last year we only had 3 permits issued. That's largely because these homeowners were aware that there was pending legislation at the time. That legislation regarding ADUs has since passed, and it's eradicated almost all development impact fees, making the construction of accessory dwelling units far more affordable to homeowners.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other comments, we're going to move to item 10, reports of city manager.
Action on that? Or is it information?
I have no reports at this time, Mayor.
Okay. Item 11, reports of city council. Anybody from the city council want to make a comment?
I have 2 things.
Councilmember Sullivan, go ahead.
So first one, I just wanted to go back really quick. A question for Melinda on item 8A. I'm sorry, I forgot to ask. But if renters or landlords or tenants have questions about the eviction process or what the city ordinance does or doesn't do, who can they call to get their question answered, or where can they go for information?
So initially, I would say they can call the city attorney's office, and we'll work with the housing department to see if we can get a process in place for that.
Cool, thank you. And then the second is just a quick informational update. The Solano County Public Health team has a really amazing website that is accessible to the public, and it has fresh information that council gets and OES services gets. The city of Vacaville does have 24 confirmed cases of COVID. Testing is not widely administered, though. The test numbers are on there as well. There's only been 1,922 people tested. So reminding folks to continue to shelter in place. But if you're interested in this information or any of the information about what the county is saying you should do in terms of shelter at home or healthcare providers or where to find protective wear. The website is fantastic. And so some of the questions we had tonight at the start of the meeting could easily be solved on this website. So if you go to solanocounty.com/departments, DEPTS/PH/ncov.asp, you can see the website and the dashboard. Or if you just Google Solano County COVID, the public health dashboard comes up, and it's super helpful and has lots of robust data. Thanks.
Yeah, actually, I was going to go ahead, Harris.
Okay, yeah, I was going to also mention some things about the COVID-19. So there were some questions about the city actually providing N95 masks and other type of, PPE to our healthcare organizations. And I can tell you that there's been a lot of community interest in this, and a lot of donations have already come in for, our local healthcare institutions. We had a school district that donated, over 1,000 N95 masks. There's been individual organizations who have donated, 100 masks here, 100 masks there. We've got some of our school districts who are, prepared and actually supplying the face shields. They're manufacturing those on their 3D machines. So, it's really been an incredible outpouring of support for our healthcare professionals. It's really not something that the city is necessarily responsible for, but it's the community as a whole, and the community is really stepping up very nicely. I agree with, Councilman Sullivan, as we've sheltered at home and been, very aware of the need to protect our neighbors, our family, those we care about. It's really made a significant positive impact on, the rate of illness. We do still see there's, people who are testing positive. There's not enough test kits out there to test everybody. So most of your healthcare organizations are being very judicious, and you've got to be symptomatic and have a certain set of symptoms in order to actually be tested. But really, I think as a whole, Vacaville has done a pretty great job in taking things to heart and making sure that they're looking out for their neighbors. So I really want to applaud our community for sheltering at home and doing what's necessary.
Thank you. Yeah, and I wanted to urge the public, especially with some of the questions that were brought up tonight, please visit our website, cityofvacaville.com, and you'll see there are places to volunteer. We have a senior hotline right now. We're looking for volunteers. We just started a new program where we're going to be taking some of the donations that we have. We're going to go to the local restaurants in town and purchase food from them. So it's doing twofold. It's supporting our restaurants and supporting our seniors, getting our seniors meals during this time. But you can go onto our website and you'll see it right there as it goes through. It's up on the screen right now. If you'd like to volunteer, if you'd like to donate, if you'd like to do deliveries, it's a great thing that the city of Vacaville is doing. The next thing I wanted to do was thank our staff. They're doing a tremendous job under all the strains that are out there, everything that's been going on, some telecommuting and working from home, but still getting the job done. I applaud them. I applaud our community. I agree with Councilmember Harris. Our community's been doing a fantastic job staying home, following the guidelines that we've asked, not going to the parks. When I say not going to the parks, not going to the playgrounds, the picnic areas, the barbecue areas. We shut down Lagoon Valley for the weekend of Easter, and that was successful. Social distancing is working, and we just appreciate everybody's help, getting over this, flattening that curve, and hopefully, like we heard Gavin Newsom say today, is we're looking at maybe the end of this shelter in place, making plans to come out of this, and I'm looking forward to that too. I want to thank this council, did a fantastic job on the phones tonight, and we moved successfully along. So thank you. And with no other comments, we'll move to item 12A, payment of claims. I'll entertain motion.
So moved.
Second.
Harris and Mashburn, second. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Mashburn?
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Beatty?
Aye.
Mayor Roulette?
Aye. We do have 2 items for closed session. We will not be reporting out, and we'll move to adjournment. Good night, Vacaville.